I appreciate many of our listeners across the Bright Spot Hour radio network who from time to time send important and pertinent material to me. And I think it is of such importance that I generally will bring it to the Bright Spot Hour radio mic and read the material to you during the time that we make the appeal and make our offers to our listeners across the Bright Spot Hour radio network. I love the United States of America, our beloved land. I think that God raised this land up nearly 250 years ago and has shed His grace on us. But I think you and I need to understand that there are many people that desire to destroy our country. They hate the United States as founded. And the day will never come when the land area, the continent of North America will not be here. During your lifetime and mine, that is not going to happen. But there is a very strong possibility that what you and I have understood to be the United States could change very abruptly. And one of my listeners sent an article to me that was published back in August the 24th of 2022, and this is from Insight. The title of the article is "Those Who Want to Destroy the Constitution." Those who want to destroy the Constitution. On Friday, the New York Times published its latest op-ed calling for the end of the Constitution of the United States. The authors, Ryan Dorfler and Samuel Moan, teach law at Harvard and Yale respectively. They argue that the left's progress has been stymied by the Constitution itself. Quote, the idea of constitutionalism, end quote, they correctly write, quote, is that there needs to be some higher law that is more difficult to change than the rest of the legal order. Having a constitution is about setting more sacrosanct rules than the ones the legislature can pass day to day, end quote. This, of course, orients the process of law toward the past. There are certain lines that simply cannot be crossed. And, as Dorfler and Moan point out, quote, constitutionalism of any sort demands extraordinary consensus for meaningful progress, end quote. And herein lies the problem for Dorfler and Moan. Constitutions, quote, misdirect the present into a dispute over what people agreed on once upon a time, not on what the present and future demand for and from those who live now, end quote. The solution, they say, lies in dispensing with the Constitution entirely. The proper solution to the Constitution is in, quote, direct arguments about what fairness or justice demands, end quote. After all, they admit, quote, it's difficult to find a constitutional basis for abortion or labor unions in a document written largely by affluent men more than 2 centuries ago. It would be far better if liberal legislators could simply make a case for abortion and labor rights on their own merits without having to bother with the Constitution. How can the Constitution be jettisoned? The authors suggest packing the Union with more states, quote, reorganizing our legislature in ways that are more fairly representative of where people actually live and vote, turning the Senate into a legislative vestal organ without any actual power. At least they're saying the quiet part out loud. The truth is that the Constitution is anti-democratic, quote unquote, in the sense that it sets up a series of limits on what a democratically elected government can do. Now, let me stop right here and explain the statement I just read to you. If the legislature of the Commonwealth of Virginia voted today by a margin of 50 votes plus 1 to 49 votes, making it a majority, a Democratic majority, that all the people over 50 years old could be executed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're just going to clear them out. We're going to kill them all. That cannot be passed in a pure democracy. That could be passed and made the law. That could be the law of the land. And there's not anything those that are 50 years old and upward could do but fight for their lives or flee. But because we have a Constitution that guarantees the individual citizen the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those three things are guaranteed by the Constitution. Therefore, if the Commonwealth of Virginia passed a law by 50 votes plus by 50% plus one vote, that all the people 50 years old and upward could be executed in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that would be a direct violation of what is stated in the Constitution, that every individual has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we do not live in a democracy. The United States is a representative republic under the Constitution of the United States, which is the law of the land. I made this comment in a political event that I was speaking at, a political forum, and I said, really, if we follow the Constitution, who we have as the President of the United States, or the individuals elected in the state legislature or the federal legislature, really are kind of beside the point, because the law of the land is not the senator or the House member or the delegate or the state senator or the county commissioner or county councilman, but the law is not that individual. The law is the Constitution. And the Constitution is a prevailing, overriding umbrella over all the legislation that may or may not be passed by individual legislatures. The role of the Supreme Court is to judge any piece of legislation passed by what is stated in the Constitution. What these two lawyers, I'm reading this article to you, want to do is they want to completely get rid of the Constitution. I mean, the Constitution goes away. And therefore, the constitutional guarantee of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness goes away. The right of free speech goes away. The right of free association goes away. The right to keep and bear arms goes away. The right that the government cannot come into my home and unreasonable search and seizure, the Fourth Amendment, all that just goes away. And then we become a government of men rather than a government of laws. And I mean, pick the worst or the best for that matter legislator you know, and they would be free if they can get a majority vote. They're free to do whatever they want to do. And there are no checks and balances or guarantees to the individual citizen, that they have these constitutionally guaranteed rights, and it doesn't matter what the legislature does. And if the legislature does violate my constitutional rights, then we have a legal court system whereby we have the redress of grievances. See, they want to do away with all of that. This is Yale and Harvard. Now let me continue on. The truth is that the Constitution is anti-democratic. That's what I just explained to you, in the sense that it sets up a series of limits on what a democratically elected government can do. It doesn't matter who the president is now. This is my comment, not what I'm reading. It doesn't matter what the president may say or do. He is bound by the Constitution. He is boxed in by the Constitution and limited by the Constitution. Now let me continue reading the article. The Constitution is a charter of limited powers delegated by the people and the states to the federal government. Neither the people nor the state governments would ever have consented to the sort of pure populism promoted by Dorfler and Moon. The founders deplored the idea of an unfettered federal government ruled only by popular passions. That is why they put in place a system of checks and balances to forestall mob majoritarianism. They recognized a simple truth, that the best and most responsive government presides over homogeneous interest, generally locally, and that as we abstract rule away from the people, interests diverge. This means that a government abstracts away from the people. This means that as government abstracts away from the people, it ought to be granted less and less power. Now, let me make this comment. I'm a Jeffersonian conservative, and Thomas Jefferson taught the principle of federalism, which is you have sovereign states. Within those sovereign states, you have sovereign counties, and so on and so forth. And the most powerful government under Jeffersonianism is the government that is closest to the people, which would be your county commission, your board of supervisors, your county council. And then it develops out from that, and then develops out from that. And the farther away from your local city council and your local county government, and then the state government, and then the farther away from the people the legislature becomes, until finally you arrive on the federal level, the weaker those legislative bodies are. Now, we have the inverse of that in the United States, where the federal legislature, the Senate and the Congress, feel like they have unlimited power, and down at the local level, the county councilmen and county commissioners and the local sheriff, people like that, have very little power or no power at all. Actually, the Constitution was the inverse of that. It was the farther away from the individual citizen the government is, the weaker that government is, and the closer to the local individual the government was, i.e. our Board of Supervisors, our county commissions, our county councils, our local sheriff, the stronger that government was, because it was the closest to the people. Let me read on now. The left hates the Constitution for precisely that reason. To the left, the Constitution is a mere barrier against the utopian mission to restructure human relations and ultimately humanity itself. In this view, large government is to be the leveling force among human beings, cramming down the views of one half of the country over the other half. Local governance is dangerous because it might lead to diversity of viewpoint and practice. Federal government is the best available tool for shaping and molding. Dispense with the Constitution's limits on the power of the federal government, and suddenly transformational change becomes possible. You remember what President Barack Obama said? Change, hope, and change. We have come to transform America. And what we are seeing now is these individuals at Harvard and Yale are saying out loud what they've been saying in the teacher's lounge and quietly among themselves for the last 20 or 25 years. We're now seeing it. And their plan is to rob us of local representation, to rob us of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to rob us of individual thought, soul liberty, if you please, and cram this overwhelming, overreaching federal national government down our throat. The only problem, let me finish reading the article. The only problem is that such a viewpoint utterly disregards the history of human relations. A government that presides over 33 million human beings with a variety of different viewpoints on core moral issues is unlikely to rule either benevolently or successfully if granted the unfettered power to flatten a multiplicity of jurisdictions and ways of life. Limits are the key to both benevolence and success in governance. Dispensing with the Constitution may sound pleasing to those who seek drastic change on the greatest scale, but drastic change of that nature typically looks more like tyranny than progress. And that is precisely what you and I are facing now. Now my time has gotten away from me on the Bright Spot Hour. May the Lord richly bless you until our program on tomorrow.